Graduation night should have marked my freedom. Instead, it became the moment everything fractured. The slap across my face from my stepfather wasn't just violence, it was the spark that lit the fuse under his entire empire of lies. My name is Sophia Reynolds, and for 12 years I had lived in the shadow of Richard Caldwell, watching him reshape my family into something unrecognizable. Standing outside Columbia Business School in my cap and gown, clutching my master's degree in finance with honors, I should have felt triumph. But anxiety twisted in my gut like it always did before family events. Richard's booming voice cut across the courtyard. "There's my brilliant stepdaughter. At 59. He cut an imposing figure in his custom suit. Silver hair flawless. Smile practiced for the cameras, but never warming those cold blue eyes. Trailing him came Brandon, my stepbrother, 2 years older, scrolling his phone with that bored entitlement. Brandon had Richard's sharp jawline, but none of the drive. Why bother when everything was handed to him? My mother, Victoria, approached quietly and squeezed my hand. She looked elegant in her emerald dress, but I caught how she instinctively shifted away when Richard neared, her smile tightening into something forced and fragile. "Top of your class," Richard said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. It looked affectionate to outsiders. To me it felt like ownership. Though I still don't get why finance, when Brandon could have placed you comfortably in marketing at Caldwell Group. The dig landed softly, disguised as concern. My 4.0 GPA, 2 competitive internships at major banks, none of it mattered next to Brandon's mediocre business degree bought with Richard's donations. "Finance is real power," I replied, holding his gaze. "You learn to see through every illusion." Something flickered in his eyes. Calculation? Maybe unease. He announced a family-only celebration back at the Greenwich estate. As we drove, Richard fell in beside me. "Now that you're done with school, it's time to contribute properly. Brandon's running the Harborview development, $80 million. That's stepping up." I bit back the retort. Brandon ran it by signing whatever Richard slid across the golf club table. I mentioned interviews in Manhattan. His laugh was ice. "Why commute when opportunity is here? Unless you're planning to abandon your mother after all we've given you." Guilt. Weaponized. My mother's inheritance from Dad mysteriously funneled into Richard-controlled investments. Looking at her quiet resignation, Brandon's sneer, Richard's controlling smile, I realized this wasn't celebration. It was another power play. The estate glowed under soft lights. By 10, guests left. In the mahogany-paneled study, Richard poured scotch. "Let's discuss your future, Sophia." Mom sat rigid, knuckles white. Brandon lounged, smirking. I repeated my plans. Richard cut me off. "Forget interviews. I've arranged junior analyst reporting to Brandon." Generous for someone with no real experience. Anger surged. "I have Fortune 500 internships. Brandon hasn't worked outside your shadow." "Watch your tone," Richard warned, face darkening. "Brandon understands loyalty." "You mean obedience," I shot back. Richard's glass slammed down. "Victoria, handle your daughter." She stayed silent, eyes on her lap. I headed for the door. "I'm 26. You can't control me. Walk out, and you're walking out on this family," he threatened. The handle wouldn't turn. Locked from outside. Brandon held up the key, grinning. Panic rose. Richard advanced. "You live under my roof. Spent my money on that degree. You owe us." Rage I'd buried for years erupted. That degree was partly my father's insurance money that vanished into your investments. I've seen the statements. Silence fell. Then Richard moved fast. His hand cracked across my cheek, the sound echoing. I stumbled, hand to my face. Tears from shock more than pain. In 12 years, he'd never struck me. The mask cracked. Mom gasped. Richard, he snarled at her to shut up. Brandon laughed. She had it coming. Talking business. I begged Mom silently. She stepped forward, but froze under his glare. You hit me, I said quietly. You needed respect, he replied, straightening his tie. Take the job or leave with nothing, no support, no references. The bruise throbbed, but fire built inside. I demanded the door unlocked. Brandon tossed the key. Smart choice. Sis. I turned back. You're right. I understand family business better than you think. Walking out. His voice chased me. Office Monday. 8 sharp. I didn't reply. 3 days to begin dismantling the empire he'd built on theft. The bruise wasn't just a mark. It was evidence. And I had inherited more than my father's eyes. I had his shares, his documents, and now the will to use them. That night, alone in my apartment, the slap replayed. Each sting reminded me of smaller violences, the way he'd isolated Mom, erased Dad's memory, turned Brandon into a puppet. I touched the swelling, feeling something shift. Fear gave way to clarity. Richard had trained me in finance to serve him, but he taught me how empires fall, from within, at their weakest foundation. The storage unit sat untouched for 3 years in a quiet industrial park outside Greenwich. I'd paid in cash, knowing one day I'd need my father's things, items Richard dismissed as junk after marrying Mom. Dust motes swirled as the door rose. Boxes held Dad's files. Photos. Memories of a man who built honestly before the car accident claimed him when I was 14. Richard arrived 2 years later, charming the grieving widow and her daughter. I pulled the old cabinet, hands trembling, and found the folder labeled Caldwell Partnership. Dad had been meticulous. The original agreement showed 45% shares in what became Caldwell Group, co-founded with Richard. After the crash, Richard claimed Dad sold them back cheaply to cover bad investments. But here was Dad's will, directing shares to me at 25. I was 26 now. The valuation report, dated a week before Dad's death, pegged his stake at $45 million. The forged papers Mom saw claimed a $2 million sale. A handwritten note in Dad's script, Richard aggressive on buyout. Refused 3 times. Keeping records. I photographed everything, transferred to a flash drive. Metadata would prove authenticity. Back home, I called my securities law professor from Columbia. She referred a forensic accountant and corporate fraud specialist. Be careful, she warned. Family cases turn ugly. I documented the bruise, photos from every angle. Timestamped statement of the assault. Witnesses noted. Public filings revealed offshore subsidiaries in Cayman and Delaware post-Dad's death. A footnote showed acquired assets exactly matching Dad's stake value. Forged sale dated 2 days after death. But recording delayed until after marriage, giving Richard control. My phone buzzed. Brandon texting. Dad says don't be late. Desk ready outside my office. I replied I'd be there. Let them believe they'd won. I drafted emails to the experts with subject urgent, corporate fraud and stolen inheritance. Created encrypted cloud storage for everything. Documents. Filings. Bruise photos. Timeline. Finally, a letter Dad wrote for my 25th birthday, hidden by Richard, claiming flood damage. If you're reading this, the shares are your security. Richard is dangerous when cornered. Trust instincts. Love. Dad. He'd suspected. Now I understood. The forensic accountant, Margaret Chen, analyzed preliminaries, 18 million unaccounted in Harborview funds, systematic fraud. I forwarded to Daniel Cross, ex-chief counsel fired by Richard for refusing shady deals. He confirmed statute of limitations open since recent discovery. His files showed Richard tried forcing buyout. Dad refused. Non-compete clauses blocked other paths, leaving death as control route. Police report, single car crash. Brake failure. Quickly closed. Daniel warned of Richard's resources. I showed assault evidence. Will need insider access. I started Monday, under Brandon, whose lazy habits would provide it. That evening Mom texted, "Please come tomorrow." Richard's giving second chance. She didn't see it was his mistake. I planned meticulously. Files to access. Conversations to overhear. Brandon's errors to exploit. The empire would fall through precision cuts. Not confrontation. Monday arrived humid. I dressed conservatively. Hint of bruise visible under makeup. Image of subdued daughter. Richard greeted loudly in the lobby, steering me upstairs. Employees watched my slight flinch. Brandon's office featured putting green and bar cart. He barely looked up. Password on sticky note, predictable. Shared drive access granted. Harborview files overflowed with fraud, shell companies, tripled invoices, ghost consultants. Brandon's signature everywhere. I prepped his presentation while copying to hidden drive. By lunch, Cayman subsidiary received $18 million, never reaching construction. Brandon praised the slides without reviewing. In meeting, CFO Marcus Hale frowned at numbers. Afterward, Marcus noted my last name. Softened, recalling Dad. Complex project, he said meaningfully. Doors open for questions. Possible ally or trap. I stayed late. Accessing deeper records via Brandon's credentials. Pattern clear. Richard siphoned using Brandon as cutout. Every trail led to Richard-controlled accounts. Working late. Richard appeared. Maybe I was harsh Saturday. Be loyal. Go far. Threat implicit via Mom. I nodded. Suppressing rage. Texted Daniel from burner. Jackpot. 18 million traced. Need 2 days. Reply. Careful. FBI ready. 2 days pretending submission. The bruise faded. But resolve hardened. Proof would topple them both. Thursday morning. Everything aligned. Daniel coordinated with FBI agent Elena Vargas. Margaret completed analysis. 23 gigabytes uploaded securely. While Richard met board and Brandon golfed. I made final sweep. Found email thread. Richard discussing life insurance on Dad weeks before crash. Forwarded immediately. At 9 a.m., Marcus burst into boardroom. Pale. Showing screen to Richard. Posture crumbled. Phones rang nonstop. 11 a.m. Breaking news. FBI raids Caldwell Group offices. 18 million questioned. Brandon rushed in golf attire. Panicked. Richard stormed out. Eyes locking on me. You, he snarled. What did you do? My job, analyzing documents you requested. Agent Vargas appeared. Step away. Mr. Caldwell. Richard backed up. Stock plummeted 30%. Accounts frozen. Cayman red flagged. Brandon cracked. Dad said it was legal, tax optimization. Richard silenced him. Agents escorted both for questioning. Richard lunged verbally. She's stealing the company. 45% was mine originally. Office silent. Shares my father left that you forged after his death, I said clearly. 32 no. 45 million valuation. Not the 2 million you claimed. Fake investments, defrauding Mom. Insurance policy motive with brake failure. Richard denied proof. FBI will find it thorough. He lunged. Agents restrained. You destroyed family. Your mother has nothing. She has freedom, I replied. I'll reclaim father's company. Handcuffs clicked. Brandon babbled cooperation. Marcus approached. You're Thomas's daughter through and through. He suspected Richard's haste post-death. By evening, news dominated. CEO arrested. Massive fraud. Daniel confirmed FBI had everything. Richard faced 20 years minimum. Brandon possibly 5 cooperating. I held 45% once restored, largest shareholder. Board emergency session tomorrow. I stood in former Richard's office. City lights below. Photo from wedding showed old dynamics. Tomorrow I'd enter as rightful heir. Saturday board meeting at estate. Richard, bailed on $5 million. Entered disheveled but arrogant. Lawyer trailing. Mom waited. Fragile yet sparked. Study, same room as Slap, now conference table. Richard began. Misunderstanding by vindictive stepdaughter. Board member interrupted. 18 million isn't misunderstanding. I placed folder. Original agreement. Will. Forged docs. Valuation. Insurance emails. Rooms silenced. Richard wavered. Board voted. Removed as CEO. Shares liquidated for costs. Mom stood. We were never family. You were prison, Sophia freed us. Richard lunged. Brandon stopped him surprisingly. Stop. Dad. It's over. I told FBI everything. Blackmail files on everyone. Betrayal hit Richard hard. Board offered interim CEO. I recommended Marcus. Took board's seat for restructuring. Richard escorted out shouting threats. Ryan followed defeated. Mom hugged me truly for first time in years. Your father proud. Daniel texted. Richard's bail revoked after threats. Held until trial. Brandon cooperating. Company survives rebuilt ethically. 6 months later. Federal courthouse packed. Richard in orange. Empire headlines. I sat with Mom and Daniel. Now chief counsel. Brandon fidgeted across aisle. Assets frozen. Clerk job. Jury. Guilty on all 23 counts. Wire fraud. Money laundering. Conspiracy. 25 years.
No parole 15.
48 million restitution. Richard glared hatred.
Emit steadily closure.
Outside. Reporters. Justice is truth prevailing. Brandon nodded acknowledgement en route to his sentencing, likely 3 years. 3 weeks later. In father's restored office at renamed Reynolds Hale Holdings. Margaret reported 12 million recovered for employee pensions. Mom. Divorced. Using maiden name. Headed to real friends lunch. Younger.
Free.
Stock recovered. Harborview profitable legitimately. Hired back questioners. Morale highest ever. Brandon texted apology. Revealing more blackmail. I deleted some bridges burned. Walking Central Park. Daniel called, appeal filed. Let him from prison. Evidence insurmountable. Fear once gave Richard power, truth stripped it. Father proud. Son set gold. Richard in prison rules. Brandon learning work. Mom laughing freely. I rebuilt worthy legacy. Not running daily, but overseeing ethics. Wealth from stake immense. But satisfaction in consequences. Bruise healed. Lesson endures. Truth most devastating weapon. Richard thought slap broke me. It freed us all. What price silence? What cost standing up? The questions linger.